How is up, everyone? And welcome back to another wonderful analysis of another Dragalia Lost banner. Today, we're going to be talking about the Eastern Emissary banner, and rather if you should summon the likes of our pal Ieyasu, or Sazanka, which a lot of people are going after because she's simply waifu material, or Addis Ababa, who's actually pretty similar to our pal Musashi. And of course, we'll cover a little bit about our welfare unit Botan. She's actually pretty decent in of herself. Now, first, the most important topic, our pal Ieyasu. Now, in order to talk about Ieyasu, we should talk about the bleed mechanic, because it's a new mechanic that these guys brought along, kind of like how energy was the last time. So I went to several sites about this before, and I wanted to make sure that I understand how bleed works. And a Chinese site that I've been visiting told me a couple interesting things about bleeding. So currently there isn't any monsters that are resistant to it. There's a base chance of 80%, so apparently you could not apply bleed. And that because there's no resistance, high Midgard was getting bleeding. So it's actually really strong. So how it works for most of the characters is that over 30 seconds you'll do like 132% damage a tick. Over 30 seconds. Each tick is like 5 seconds. So yeah, it adds up quite a bit. It is not a joke. And 132% is for the 4-star units. For 5-star unit, like our pal Ieyasu, he deals 146% damage a tick. So, every 5 seconds for 30 seconds, 146 times 6. Yeah, that would be it. 6 times 5, 30. 876% damage if the bleed goes through its duration. Now, the other thing about bleeding that makes it really strong is that it stacks up to 3 times. So you're looking at some serious chunks of damage that you could continuously stack on top of one and another. It is a very dangerous status condition that you can inflict on the enemy right now. I would say it's overpowered because there's currently no resistance for it. Unlike, say, poison. See, the problem with poison is that although the duration is shorter and you do damage each tick at like 3 seconds, it's like what, 15 seconds for every tick for 3 seconds. The base damage is much lower. It's like 50% or something like that instead of this crazy 146% each tick. I don't know what this is, but this is like out of control. I would say this is in a way a power creep in of itself. I don't know how they're going to balance this in the future. If there's going to be enemies that have no resistance to it. Maybe they'll build up resistance, I don't know. But currently, apologies, currently there is no resistance for it. So as long as you hit the 80% base chance, you will apply a lot of damage. So with regards to Ieyasu, his Sakura Flurry, his first base skill, is only a SP cost of 2,467. So you can spam this thing very handily. Now, with regards to skill haste, if your SP cost is low, you can most certainly unleash 1 or maybe even 2 extra attacks in a map. But that only applies to really short SP cost skills. This one is incredibly powerful. Sakura Flurry is, let's see, 8 hits of 119% damage base. So 119 times 8, 952 plus the 800 something. We're looking at like something that's basically two skills worth of damage in one skill. It is incredibly powerful. It is absolutely out of control. And then there is a second skill, which is the Blade Formation. Now, Blade Formation builds up on giving him more critical if he attacks somebody who's bleeding. 15% is no laughing matter. And that SP cost, though, is like at about 8,000. So you can set it up in a way where you can already have somebody bleeding and then use Sakura Flurry to do even more damage. Although crit does not work with bleeding, the main skill will most certainly benefit from it. On top of all this, it heals you quite a significant amount, at a 35% recovery potency every 3 seconds. I was listening to Kevin talk about how much he healed yesterday when he was fighting High Jupiter. He said he healed up to like 700. That's really amazing. For a skill like that, you might not even need healer. Well, no, it depends on the mechanics. I can't say it so soon, but it will make your life much easier. So this character is actually pretty brutally OP, but the problem lies with the exact mechanic that makes him strong, the bleeding. Because if they do eventually build a resistance to bleeding, then most of your mechanics will start to fail. However, he does have a great fallback, and that is the fact that he is a katana unit. Being a dark katana unit, you have the strongest katana in the game. You have yet another skill, a weapon skill that does a chunk of damage. So he can still work, even despite the fact that, you know, bleeding doesn't work, might not work down the line. But right now, he is absolutely insane, out of control. Though I think it might be kind of... I also might think that it's kind of like too much, unneeded at the moment. I feel like it's a bunch of unneeded strength. Because right now, the only opponent that you're going to be seriously fighting with this is what? Jupiter of Aster? Ooh, that's great. He has paralysis resistance. So with paralysis resistance, he's not gonna be fighting in IO. He's gonna get blinded. He's not gonna be able to see shit, and then he's just gonna like be completely useless with all of his damage aside. However, if he's working at his max potential and getting his crit rate and his critical damage going, he does ridiculous amount of damage. Now, if dots can also crit, that would be beautiful. I feel like that's his main flaw, is the fact that his dots don't crit, because his dots do so much damage. But his main skills do crit, and you can spam it pretty readily. 2,467 SP cost is no joke. You can seriously spam with this guy. So I feel like I would want to try to summon him a little harder than I normally would. But you can probably hold off from this, because High Jupiter is not likely to be the next fight. It's likely going to Mercury. Now, I'm not gonna like bet money on it or anything, because they could just end up, you know, just throwing the whole pattern under the bus or something like that, and just be like, oh, you know what, Light is the next fight that we're gonna get. But chances are we're probably gonna go through the 3 main elements first. So Mercury is probably the next one. Even if not, alright, even if not, we still have like months before we actually get to the next high dragon. So it will be a while before we get to Jupiter. And when Jupiter does come out, there could be another dark event that happens, like one with a facility event where there's another wonderful, powerful, new mechanic, dark character shows up. So that could also overtake our pal Ieyasu. Like I said, they eventually could do something about bleeding, because currently as it is, without any resistance, it's really strong. Although the base chance is at 80%, so there's a chance of failure. And if there is eventually is going to be resistance, that 80% is going to hinder him quite a bit, because I don't see anything else currently that allows him to get more. So you have to be a little wary with him. I'm still going to summon, but I'm not going to summon like super hard. I'm going to just kind of scratch the surface of my Dimanium, and we'll end it with that. But
yeah. You covered the unit. I don't have that much to add specifically on him. You said bleed stack, so his blade formation, if you're running with other bleed users, you're gonna have super awesome uptime of that bleed. So that's nice. And I guess one thing I want to point out is there's definitely a risk that they do add resistance to bleed, but I personally think it's not as big a deal, because unlike with some of the crowd control abilities, it's just damage. And while that's still very strong, the worrisome thing for these high dragons would be if you could put them to sleep or freeze them, you could just trivialize a lot of the difficult mechanics. A well-coordinated team could just freeze and sleep and blind at the right times and really make it a lot easier. Whereas this is just straight up DPS check, more damage by bleed. So I think they can combat this by just increasing the stats on the dragon if the bleed damage becomes too high. Being just a pure dot, I think it's less troublesome than like freeze or or blind or one of those. So, but you know, you never know. There's always a chance that they could put in resistance to bleed, in which case that's going to weaken a lot of these units that are relying on bleed to do extra damage.
Bleed does do a lot of damage, and the fact that it stacks is really good, because currently poison does not stack. If you do it again, you will get... Oh, actually, hold on, I might be wrong there. I have to go and check Eleonora, because Eleonora has 2 poison attacks, so it might be good to be sure about this. I'm gonna have to look into Eleonora real quick. But anyway, so we'll skip to that when I actually do a thing, and I'll just add on to the video in a little bit. So, now let's talk about our pal, Marishiten. Marishiten is absolutely amazing. At 60%, our first 60% Dark Dragon. Did you manage to get him in your summoning, by the way?
No.
You should probably get that.
Or not Zodiac, what Needhog?
No, you ended up getting Needhog. Oh my god, yeah, Needhog is kind of like... It's a problem with Needhog.
I have Max Unbound Juggernaut anyway, so... Yeah, I mean... I don't know if I'm going to use it, but because of the increase of the stats, I am concerned that the Max Unbound Juggernaut's not going to be good enough when we finally need to use it for High Dragon, so I'm still going to try to summon for the 60% Strength Dragon, but... You know, I also have not bought all the packs yet, so my summoning's not complete.
Yeah, I already spent all my money on the New Year's thing, but the monthly thing is coming, so I'll try a little bit harder. Maybe I can avoid using Dragon Stones. But currently, because these are limited characters, you may want to try to summon at least one, because this thing is 60%, and on top of this, Daybreak Flurry does apply bleed. Now, we already talked about how much bleeding does. It does like 130 or 140 on like each tick of their attack damage. Now, imagine a dragon's attack damage. Dragons can hit pretty hard. So this bleed is not like your normal bleeds. This will hurt a lot. I highly recommend picking up this dragon if you have any interest on doing High Jupiter at some point, or something that is strong and light, because this seems like a very lethal combination on a dragon. Because, like I said, like what you said earlier, with stuff like freeze or like stun, they don't work on bosses. Blind as well. So Needhog is kind of like, might as well hang himself, because he's kind of like, he's kind of like dead on arrival for the most part. It only works on IO.
It's only going to be if it's like the thing with Poseidon, where you need that HP to get past an HP check. That's pretty much going to be his.
Yeah, that's the only thing. If by that point we still have not yet get an HP Dark Dragon, which is not likely, because we did see Tsukuyomi before, so there's a chance that what will end up happening is that we will get a HP Dragon in the form of her, with her massive boobs giving us massive HP, and we have healers to do the job. What might also happens is that the next banner might just feature a really good Dark Healer, which could be interesting in itself. But I think if you want to future-proof yourself a little bit, Ieyasu is a good choice. Paralyzed may not seem very strong right now, but Paralyzed eventually is going to get scary. If Hybrid Hill does any indication, you lose like a chunk of your health as soon as you're hit, and then you're basically sitting at 1 health for like 30 seconds until it wears off. So it is very, very deadly. And if Paralysis does this, it's even scarier, because sometimes your action gets interrupted. So you're just like, take a whole bunch of damage, and then say Jupiter does like some quick attacks, like just that normally wouldn't kill you, but since you suddenly took a chunk of damage and you couldn't roll for a split second, you end up taking those hits, then you die. So Paralysis is not to be underestimated. I remember reading a thing on Reddit about what do you think is the scariest status effects? People usually say stun or freeze and yada yada yada, but Paralysis, it's on the way bottom. And then after that, it's burnt, and then they say that burning is actually worse than Paralysis. So Paralysis has been underestimated, but I don't think that will be the case if High Jupiter were to come out with a really, really high damaging Paralysis. I guarantee you it'll be very scary.
Yeah, that Primal Thunder move that the normal Jupiter uses. The high Jupiter one's probably I'm very scared.
Cover the whole map. You can just see it. You just see a whole bunch of circles on the map. You have to actually dodge them like this. Whoop, 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 like dodging through little cracks. Now that would be a challenging fight. I hope that that's what they do, because I love that kind of stuff. Oh, I just love dodging into little cracks in the maps and evading attacks like some kind of I don't know. I can't think of a quite apt description. I'm thinking about like these Gundams just dodging like these Macross missiles that are just flying all over the place. But I don't know if that's a properly apt description of the situation. Anyway, so brain damage aside, that's pretty much it about my thoughts on the wonderful hot dragon Marishiten and Ieyasu. So since I've gone and, you know, spent most of the time talking about these things, Burke, why don't you cover Sazanka the waifu? Tell us, since you've already used her quite a bit, what are your thoughts on our pal Sazanka?
She is great. If you like axe users, this is going to be another very strong one. And she's also got some very interesting things with her kit that are very abnormal. I'm not even sure we have anyone with something like this in the 4 stars yet. So, and I'll get to that in a second. She's obviously waifu material. I mean, look at her art. That's one reason people are going to be pulling for her. This is also her first dark banner, so get some of these units. But specifically for Sazanka, she's got another skill with bleed, just like is the theme on this banner. Her first skill, Dancing Blossom, is going to inflict bleed, and it's about 2,800 or so is the SP cost, so pretty solid. Good skill. Then you've got her second skill, which is like what Hawk and what's the other Nefaria? They have those skills where they activate these stances, and hers will inflict sleep on the enemies. So you're talking about now she can do bleed, and she can do sleep. On high dragons, sleep is almost certainly never going to work, because it's, again, you put the dragon to sleep and you ignore stuff. But we've already seen bleed works. This will still be a lot of fun in some of the IOs and things. Put them to sleep and bleed them. This is a kit you see on the 5 stars. You don't see it on 4 stars. So it is a little bit high SB cost at 6,400. But the good thing with these skills are that these stances, they last permanently. They're charges. You get 3 charges. Unlike a stance like, say, Mikoto, where it runs out and you need to try and get to the next stage, this one's just up. So you can hold it if you need to dodge or something. You've got that flexibility to move around and keep your stack up to use it later. So Blooming Cradle, great skill. She's got the typical co-op defense ability, which, as people are starting to see, when these stat checks are so high, having as much HP, defense, they're all good. Hers is going to go all the way up to, at max, 11%. That's the standard for 4-star axes. And then looking at her abilities, what's up?
Oop, I cut that part off.
I thought you were jumping in. She's got Gauge Accelerator. Very good ability. It's always better to speed up the rate at which the gauge decreases. It's not flashy, but it gets the job done. If you've already played with someone, I think Xander, like you'll notice it. It's very noticeable when someone has Gauge Accelerator ability. She's got 100% paralysis res. We already covered that prior. It's going to be great for the high Jupiter. Not that useful right now, but down the road, going to be useful. And she's got Sleeping Punisher. So I think many people have been frustrated with Hawk and Nefaria when you have these Punisher skills and then they don't do anything when the dragons are immune. It's the same type of thing here, but unlike those two, she has another type of debuff that does work with bleed. So she can still do the extra damage with bleed even if the enemy is not going to be able to be put to sleep. So it's got the same flaws. It's just maybe a little less or a little more tolerable on her because she's got the bleed. So in terms of her as a unit, I've been enjoying her a lot. Axe 4 strikes are fun to use because even though it's a little wonky with the charge, it being in that circular AoE, it's very easy to control where you're hitting. Anyone that's played Vanessa has probably been spamming it like crazy on HMS, so it's you know, they're going to be used to doing that. And yeah, she's there's not much really bad to say about her. If you get her, I would definitely recommend investing in her.
Agreed. I really like the duality that she has, because Sleeping Punisher and Sleep in of itself, while it doesn't work on bosses, is deadly for mobs. So if, say, Jupiter decides to summon a whole bunch of little tiny chocobos running around, well, you can finally strut your stuff, put them all to sleep, and then immediately finish them off with a Dancing Blossoms, doing chunks of damage, and if they're not dead from that and the Sleeping Punisher attached, they will bleed to death. It'll be absolutely glorious.
Yeah, agreed. Anytime there's these ads that are probably not going to have the res, this is going to be fantastic for crowd control. Sleep really is one of the better abilities, and that's also why I think they made the High Dragon.
Yes, so like that. But, you know, she redeems herself against the High Dragons with the Gauge Accelerator, breaking them much, much harder. And for Axe, it's all about using your Force Strikes. So she can really contribute in all kinds of situations. I like that a lot about her.
Definitely. I mean, she's not gonna put out the DPS of Ieyasu, but she's gonna have very valuable.
Yeah, with that bleed, she's gonna still put out some serious DPS. Now, the main problem I find is also that paralysis resistance. I love it. It would be great for High Jupiter, but I also wanted to bring her to Imperial Onslaught so badly, but I can't because she's gonna get blinded, and that'll be the end of her.
Yep.
Now, unless you dodge, but then you can't auto that map. You know what I mean? Then again, you can't really auto with someone who uses their Force Strikes until they finally patch into that allows AI to use Force Strikes as well. Unfortunate.
Yeah, I think right now the main units that you can bring to the Light IO are Berserker and Climate.
There's a couple others that have blind resistance, like 3 stars, such as Vice and the Butler. What was it? Edward. But yeah, the choices in that IO, if you want to auto battle, is pretty low. Unfortunate. I was really hoping for blind, but if she could assist her lord in fighting Jupiter, I don't have any complaints. Those two will work great as a team. Absolutely beautiful. Inflicting, if Ieyasu didn't inflict bleed for whatever reason, well then she might inflict bleed. 80% is 80%.
Yep.
Alright, well then. Let's move on to the next dude, Addis. So with Addis, he's actually pretty simple. His kit is just like Musashi's kit. He has a buff, he has a self buff, and he has a main skill. And then he has his resistances. They're different, of course. Addis has Broken Punisher, which is it's good. Don't get me wrong, it's good. You do chunks of damage to enemies on the ground. But Musashi has Overdrive Punisher, which allows him to do more damage to someone who has Overdrive, which will help allow, not only will you do more damage, but you break them a little easier. I find Overdrive Punisher a little bit better than Broken Punisher, but I would not write Broken Punisher out either. Of course, he also comes with Bleeding Punisher. So, Bleed being the non-resisting ability debuff at the moment, you can do 8% more damage to someone who's bleeding. And on top of all the dots that you're doing from bleed already, you can expect quite a bit of damage out of this dude. He's actually really, really, really good. Now, that's the problem with comparing him and Musashi. Musashi comes with last offense. Sure, you get like a massive 40% strength for 15 seconds when your HP drops to 30, but the problem is that you only get it once, and sometimes it comes out at a most awkward time. Naturally, when you have like a 40% strength buff, you want to use a skill during that time. But say you're fighting high Mercury, and well, Mercury does is do it blast, and then all of a sudden you're like 1 health. You waste that opportunity with last offense. So I find that Musashi, while comparable, is a little bit weaker. Just a little bit. Now, the reason behind this is that their self-buffs and their main skills work a little differently. Now, Addis' main skill is about doing 3 hits of wind damage and then applying a debuff. With the poison, it's not very strong. As we've talked about before, poison is kind of weak now. 50% every like 3 seconds. Of course, there are stronger ones. Eleanor could do a little bit more, but I'll look into that. Anyway, let me see. The damage is 216%, so he's looking at like 600%. While Musashi, Spellsting Dragon, is 432% in 2 hits, so that's 800%. So he does quite a bit more skill damage in of himself. However, our friend Addis Ababa makes up for it if he has Dignified Soul active and does the Bleed thing. Bleed will more than make up for it in terms of DPS. And not to mention that Dignified Soul, that buff that he has, is also pretty strong, with the ability to increase his strength for 25% for 10 seconds. Unlike Musashi, who's like 30% for 5 seconds. Now that's just terrible. Dude, that's the only time you can do with this within 5 seconds is to unleash your skill quickly. And if you don't, you waste your buff. That's the problem I've had with Musashi. With our power Addis, it's not so bad. The buff is like 5% less, but hey, you got 5 seconds more to use it with. That's really strong. And then, on top of this, it turns that damage to bleeding instead of poison. So, I know that people like Musashi. I still like Musashi. His skill will do more damage, period. But I believe Addis will do more damage in the long run. Not even a long run, in a very short run. After a little bit, he'll do more damage, just from the bleed alone, and the fact that Dignified Soul lasts 10 seconds. That's really significant. That 5 seconds for Musashi is not very good. Though Musashi's Force of the Wind is only 4,430 SP, Dignified Soul isn't that much expensive either. It's like 4,800. So I think that Addis is probably a little bit better than Musashi, in my opinion. Some may disagree, but I think, thanks to that stupid bleed mechanic at the moment, he's a little bit better. Well, that and the fact that last offense compared to Bleeding Punisher is just not quite a contest, you know what I mean? It's really good, but it depends on the timing when it comes out. Anyway, I feel like I spent too much time on this dude, so why don't we move on?
Well, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting because we finally have a good, like, we have 2 units that are so similar like this that are the same rarity. Like, the last time I can think of this is we had, like, Lois, and she, like, was very similar to Eleonora, but they're, like, different rarities, so it's a little harder to compare. The only other point I'd like to make is that the Bleeding Punisher on him is going to really be more team dependent. I think if you have a team where you've got many more sources of bleed, then I think Addis is going to start to shine, because his first ability is going to be poisoned much more often than not, because it's still only a 10-second buff on Dignified Soul. So it's probably, even if you want to wait and time it, like,
that's true too.
You're still going to be, you're not going to have bleed up all the time. Now, if you have 2 other units that are putting bleed on stuff, and you've got this great uptime on Bleeding Punisher, then yeah, I think in that case, he's definitely going to do way more damage.
That is true. That is true. Well, the other thing about them is their resistance. Of course, resistance is like the most basic thing to talk about, but it's probably the most important if High Vanilla taught us anything. The freeze resistance might not be very useful on Mercury, in which case then our pal Musashi's definitely got quite an advantage over this. However, right now Addis would be beautiful to use in IO at the moment, thanks to having a 100% freeze resistance. So take it as you will, but I definitely would build him up for use in Water IO, especially since we're going to be looking at we're going to be looking at Mercury soon. You want to start farming up those metals. Not to mention, Katana uses water metals, Spear uses water metals, so you want to start working on getting a good team, or at least having a good unit so they can go into a team with a powerful wind unit. So Addis is definitely good for that job. Alright, well that's about it for those two, unless you have anything else to add.
Nope.
Alright, then let's move on to something. Shall we go talk about Botan, or should we go through the wyrmprints, because it is part of the banner after all?
Let's go to the wyrmprints.
Okay, we'll just cover it really briefly, because they're really not all that great. So, the Happy New Year one. You have anything to say about it? Because I probably have like snarky things to say about it being really terrible.
This particular one, I don't think is very good. But I made a point last time when one of these came out that when certain ones come out, like let's say blind resistance plus 40%, that is going to be much more exciting. That's what I'm waiting for. I think you're not going to be able to hit 100%, but still, if you can get other units, lower stars that you want to use, get them up to 90% paralysis res. That's a lot better. Or not paralysis, blind, I mean, because that's the one we hate.
Yeah, that's the one that's evil. Yeah. Unfortunately, this one's just paralyzed resistance, and a damage reduction of 10% for light is... It's kind of significant. It will help you. It'll keep you alive. But, again, paralysis is not what you need for this. You need blindness. If it has blindness resistance, I would have liked it a lot more, because the light resistance would have kept them alive longer in the auto IO, and then the blindness would keep them from, well, I can't see anything. Then you can use someone like Rodrigo, which Burke likes a lot, into... But actually, does Rodrigo have paralyzed or blind? Now I think about it. I don't remember.
He has paralysis res.
Ah, scheisse. Well, at least he'll have a decent shot at not getting blinded, at the very least. There are some people who don't have 100% blind resistance. But anyway, that's just a conjecture. Maybe one day they'll have a card like that. But I much prefer the other one that we saw last time with the Lucretia banner, where you could have something that builds up to 100% on a wyrmprint. That was good. That is really good. Unfortunately, Happy New Year has to sacrifice some of it with reducing damage, which doesn't really do much for me. It'll help in IO, but nah. I much prefer ignoring the status effects. That's what kills people. Alright, shall we move on to the next one? The Herald of Hinomoto. So, we had a discussion about how skill damage is pretty much king at the moment, so we don't really need to go about that, but on top of this one, it does have a skill haste of 5% on top on it, rather than, say, Rendition, which has 5% extra crit, which I think might be a little bit better. It is a crit rate, not crit damage. Crit rate is very good, in my opinion, because it'll give you more chance of doing that 70% extra damage. Whereas with this 5%, I feel it's kind of a dubious use. Yeah, I mean, like, Ieyasu's skill charge is like 2,400. I mean, 5% is like, let me check real quick because I can't do my math. 0.05. It's like 120. It's a very minuscule amount, even then. So I feel like, I don't know, skill haste seems a little dubious. What do you think?
I like skill haste in this and this wyrmprint, but I don't think it is worth investing in for many of the reasons you just said. Also, Plunder Pals exists, and so I don't want to spend all my keys investing in this when I have something already maxed to 100 that's not that much.
Yeah.
It's still good, though. I mean, if you get it, and some units will want the one with crit more, some units will want the one with skill haste more, but it's a good wyrmprint. It's just like, it's not exciting because we have many things like this.
But do you think it'd be enough to, say, I don't know, be able to proc once or twice extra attack? Because that's what the skill haste hinges on. You have to be able to unleash one extra attack for it to make up for it. I don't know if that little tiny bit of increase will be enough. You have to basically unleash your skill like 20 times in a map in order for it to make up for it.
I think a unit that already has skill haste passive would like this more.
You're saying like someone like, almost said Cleopatra, like Nefaria then. Nefaria with the skill haste, her passive of 15%, I think.
I think that's right, yeah. The bows have skill haste.
Yeah. So if you were to do that, then it'll turn into 20%, in which case you would get an extra skill every 5 use. In which case, I think that would be a little better. But by itself, it's kind of a dubious use, whereas the other wyrmprints work better in a group and by themselves. So I'm kind of iffy about Heralds of Hinomoto for this reason. I was talking about how I don't really want this wyrmprint, and someone says like, no, that's not right. This wyrmprint is good, but I find it still kind of iffy. That 5% could have been like 10%. I think they need to work on making skill haste more attractive, either by doubling that amount or something.
Yeah, they can like change around the SP cost on the skills too.
Yeah, because like I said, like these maps, they currently don't last long enough for you to unleash your skill 20 times in order to get that 5% bonus from the skill haste. You're not gonna be able to reasonably unleash your skill that much in like a 5-minute time frame, which is what most maps are. Unfortunately, we don't have a map that lasts longer than 5 minutes. This is a cell phone game. Maybe down the line they might, but currently 5 minutes is probably even too much. I think maps are like 4 minutes now, 3 minutes. So it's a little unfortunate.
Yeah, and if you could use, like, if you didn't have to use high X wyrmprint for those too, like on those super long battles, the skill haste would be much better. But unfortunately, you don't have the ability to.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Well, hopefully skill haste will get fixed in the future. Alright, well, why don't we talk about Botan and we'll call it a day. Botan as it's not part of the banner or anything, but it's still, you know, part of this event. And she is pretty useful in my opinion. Have you been using her a little bit?
Just really for the back line. I just immediately got her to 70 and slapped her on my...
I mean, she's really not like anything special. I mean, she does do the bleeding thing, like all the others, which is quite a bit of damage. And her petal piercers, 5 hits of 150, so that's 750%. It's a modest amount of damage, and with bleeding on top of it. Now, one other thing about her second skill is that while it does have a pretty decent SP cost, it's 15% damage for the entire team. I've always liked these buffs. It really, really increased group DPS. I think it shouldn't be underestimated. It's the same thing with Zan. What are your thoughts on group buffs like that? I mean,
I like them a lot.
Yeah,
because it's like, you know, there are a lot of units that we just talked about too, Musahi and the other Addis, that have these strength buffs, and then you see how much more damage they do, and this is for yourself plus your entire team. So while the other ones might be, what, 25% or something, this adds up to a lot when you factor in your entire team getting it. I guess maybe you don't care as much for your healer, but you know, 10% for you and 3 other DPS, there you go. That's 30% if you have it on you and 2 other DPS, and if you want to count your healer, it adds up. And it just makes the burst on some of those other super DPSers, like, you know, the Mikotos out there, it makes it very, very powerful.
Yeah. Now, the co-op ability is the standard spear one, but because of how well she works with her comrades, which is the same from Hinomoto, Ieyasu, and Sazanka, they'll be great on a team. HP increase and defense increase, absolutely crazy. All we need is another paralysis healer. Oh wait, guess what? Cleo is in the game. So there you go. A very powerful team could be created with the stuff that we have right now, and we can put an end to Jupiter when she comes out. We pretty much have everything. We have a spear user to give more HP in case Jupiter somehow hits more than it should. We have a defender with axe that does this. So this banner in of itself is actually really easy to pull, because you already have like 2 things that are available to you for free, and then you have the axe user. The only thing that's quite hard to get is Ieyasu, but if you do end up getting Ieyasu, I think you'll be very valuable on the team with these units. It is a very powerful anti-high Jupiter unit. I'm saying it right now. You will destroy Jupiter with this. However, there are some unfortunate things with Botan, and that's that she does have 2 abilities that are kind of like wasted. One is the paralysis being only up to 50%. That's sad for a 4-star unit. That's something a 3-star unit would do, and even then they can have 75%. So that's some sadness to all. And then there's Thalmian's Bane, which only works on Thalmians, which I don't think Jupiter is. I think Jupiter counts as a dragon. So
yeah, that's by far my biggest gripe with these the welfares, is that they kind of screw them with this Bane, you know, whatever Bane plus %, and they're great for that event, but then for permanently moving forward, they are hindered by losing their 100% resist. I get that they don't want to make the welfare things great. I mean, they always give us these dragons and they look like 5 stars, but they're eh. And they don't want to give out super strong, amazing, as powerful as gacha servants here, or not servants,
servants,
but, servants. Oh, FGO. But it's still frustrating when because this could be a unit you really like or something, like, oh wow, Botan's hot, I want to use her, and then now she's handicapped hot. Yeah, she is. She looks nice. The one other thing I want to mention here with her is that one of the biggest downsides with these strength buff skills is that their SP costs are horrible, and hers is not an exception. However, she has skill prep, which means that you can cut her skill prep 50%. You can cut that SP cost in half, and having it much closer to, 3,000 something instead of her 7,000 full, it means it's going to be easier to really activate in time for breaks and other important times where you want to go ham. So I do think that works in her favor and makes her strength buff for the team even stronger.
Yeah, I mean, it is a head start, but the problem is that it's a one-time use thing. A lot of her abilities might as well not be there in situations. So that's the problem with welfare units. They're like 3-star units for the most part, if you really think about it. Because skill prep goes to 75% for 4-star. Paralysis goes to 100% for 4-star. Right now she has half of both. And the only thing that makes up for it is Thalmian's Bane if she fights a Thalmian. If she doesn't, then it's a wasted slot. So she's like maybe even worse than a 3-star unit. It's really unfortunate.
Yeah, I've sent in feedback on this already, and they don't have to make them as good as the gacha 4-star adventurers, but if they could at least fix it so that you don't have an ability that works for a couple weeks and then no longer matters ever again. I guess maybe they could rerun this, but who cares? That's still basically no time that this the ability is relevant. They could do something about that to help them be a little stronger after their event. That would go a long ways to help them.
Yeah, I mean, like, a way to upgrade their paralysis resistance, a way to upgrade the skill prep, and then say the Thalmian's Bane becomes something else after the event. That would be really nice. But as it stands at the moment, she's easily the weakest bleed user at the moment. But she does complement her team well, so you at least have something if you really need to get into the high Jupiter. Something. I mean, Cleo clears paralysis as well, so once cleared, you just need to start dodging some mechanics. It's not like it's too hard or that. Still, it would be nice if she's just, 100% right off the bat.
Agreed.
Well, that's pretty much it for our covering of this event. Do you have anything else to add?
Nope.
Well, then that's about it then. I thank you all for joining us in this. I hope this will help make your decision of should I keep summoning for Ieyasu or just summon the Axe Scroll much easier than it would normally be. Because Ieyasu, while very strong, you could end up with something else down the line. I mean, the Axe Scroll is perfectly fine for Jupiter. And, I mean, you can still run Cleo if all things fails. At least she can actually, handle the content as well. So, it's not a high necessity, but he is really, really strong. I have to emphasize it right now. That bleed and all that stuff that works with him is really strong. His only down point, whatever. What am I trying? What's the proper word for it? Oh my god.
Downside?
Downside. There we go. His only. Oh my god, I've got brain damage. His only downside is it's exactly because of that bleeding. But other than that, well, that and his second skill isn't exactly a damaging skill. But the fact that he can heal himself and do so much critical damage kind of makes up for it. Still, that second skill not being a damage skill is kind of worrisome, because one of the reasons why Taro does so much damage and is on the top of the DPS charts is because, one, the stupid katana is really strong, but he has 3 skills, and they all have low cooldowns. So he just kind of spams, well, no, maybe the sword skill isn't low cooldown, but you know what I mean. That he can spam his 2 skills quite a bit, and he has that. So if the bleed does not come into play, Ieyasu does get quite weak. So maybe down the line, if you really want to wait, you may find something else better than Ieyasu. So I would say to try to get the 60% dragon. If you can't get the 60% dragon, all is not lost either. Something else might come along, but I would be on the safe side on things. Having that at least 40% dragon would be very nice. If you can't do it, then just max Unbound Juggernaut. Juggernaut will still serve you nicely. I've used Max Unbound Juggernaut for the longest time. Burke uses Max Unbound Juggernaut for the longest time. He still will help you a lot with doing damage. But if you were to, say, get that Marishiten or whatever, Marishiten, you will do so much extra damage because of that Bleed Dragon skill and the fact that, well, you get a whole bunch of extra stats. It'll also make you look better. I mean, that 60% or 40% increase of strength is pretty scary. But other than that, though, I mean, you could just summon the Axe Girl or just skip it altogether. Most of your stuff is kind of already there. And the wyrmprints are not really all that impressive either. And, well, that's about it for today's programming. I thank you all for watching. Until next time.